Recording in progress.
That's on your view. I think that's up to you to sort on your view, your gallery.
Just a couple of seconds to admit.
I've got everyone here, Camps, so I can do it just seeing you, really.
Just go to multi-speaker on the top right. I think it's the way to the view. If you click on that.
Couple of additional people to admit, and we're gonna start off.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm gonna kind of track anyone with in the waiting list. So
sorry,
I think we're gonna start off. Yes, I think good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think Nick is in. Perfect. Nick adjusted. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you stay. My name is William, and I'm very pleased. I'm the CEO of the World Squash. I'm very pleased to welcome you for this new edition of the World Squash Talks. And we have the pleasure today to welcome Rob and David, of course, Campion, a distinguished member of our coaching commission. And just say I'm very pleased to have someone invited who was born the same year as me, 1965, and is also a real Brummie. That means with Zina, my president, I'm in a very good company. So I just want to say that this is an important aspect of our strategy regarding bringing distinguished guests from the coaching community to be able to share their views and their expertise, their knowledge. And I think today we're going to have an amazing session with Rob. So over to you, David, to give some more explanation on Rob, who has been recently appointed as the head coach, high performance coach of the England squash, leading to the Olympic Games in LA 28. Over to you, David, and thank you very much again, Rob, for being the distinguished kind of speaker of this session.
Yeah, thank you, William, and good morning, good afternoon, evening, everybody, wherever you're dialing in from. Look, this initiative is all about helping you, and it's been a real success so far. But I think having Rob on today is something that's very unique, and I'm really excited to invite Rob here for you guys to learn from. Rob, without doubt, undoubtedly the most successful squash coach in the world right now. Prolific track record, and I'm really looking forward to getting in, delving into it with Rob about what it is he actually does and how he goes about that. So this is, if you make sure you've got your piece of paper and your pen into hand, and make your notes. You can watch this back, obviously, because you're registered at any time. But look, Rob he's doing some great things. Like William said, he's working with the England setup now as their Olympic program consultant. He's done a fabulous job with many players, not just the ones that you all know about, but there are many behind the scenes that you don't know about. Lots of, several top class juniors that he's coaching. I think he's got 4 England number ones at the moment that he coaches at various age groups. So look, let's get straight into that. And if anybody's got any questions at all, just stick them in the group chat. William will intervene at any point. We're going to leave some time at the end as well, maybe 15-20 minutes at the end for any of you to ask any questions. But if you do have anything, put them in the chat, and if it's relevant at the time, we might jump in. Keep yourselves on mute so that we can make sure we maximise listening to Rob, and enjoy the session. So Rob, look, first question really for you is, I don't know anybody in the world who can affect change as quickly in a player, make that shift, that fundamental shift as quickly as you can. It's almost instant. And I've seen it many, many a times. So very first question, which I'm sure everybody will be really interested in hearing from you on, is how are you able to affect change so quickly in every player that you work with?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Sometimes I ask myself that question, but it's very simple, Camps. My coaching philosophy is very simple. I can implement probably sort of sometimes complicated things very simply and very quickly. And to me, the key thing when I get a player, obviously I'm privileged to get some reasonable players when they first come, but I do also get people who aren't particularly great players who then become better players, and also juniors that aren't particularly good and become good juniors. So the first thing I look at is I analyse exactly where they are now. That's the most important thing for me. So, for example, I just had Nick Wall. Obviously, I've seen Nick play a few times, and I very quickly, just from watching for 5 minutes, there's 4 things I can see going wrong. For example, with someone like Nick, his swing was too big, a fraction too big, and therefore his swing was too big. He couldn't hit a drop shot. His footwork, he was taking too big of strides. And therefore he's a big lad. He was getting tired. And it was very predictable, and he took big strides. So he needed to be more balanced and more efficient with his movements. He was hitting the ball in the wrong position. He was hitting the ball slightly too far in front of himself, so therefore it was too flat. He was also hitting the ball too hard. So therefore he was either pinging off the back wall or it was ending up short a lot of the time. And also his opponent was then playing the ball before Nick was actually back balanced. I had Sam Tolling the other week, but some similar things with him, but slightly different. So that's the first thing you've got to do. You've got to assess where they are now. You've got to have a look at the overall picture and then very quickly think, okay, what's the biggest change I can make to a player? Because a lot of coaches, for starters, coaches sometimes they see something going wrong and they might identify the wrong thing. For example, they might think it's a swing, but it's actually the footwork. So someone like Paul Collivon thought I'd change his swing, but actually the biggest thing I did straight away with Paul was address his footwork, because he was again taking big lunges, and he was a very poor mover, Paul, although he was very athletic. He wasn't balanced at all on the ball. So once I get the footwork corrected, I could actually get his swing in position and start hitting the ball a lot better. So it's that fundamental thing of seeing and understanding what's going wrong. Obviously they need to know, because a lot of coaches, they see something going wrong and they actually change the wrong thing. So that's another skill. So, for example, if someone keeps catching the sidearm on a forehand drive, it may well be you need to realise that that's probably because they're taking the ball behind them and using the wrist too much. Now, if you start changing the footwork or change something else or change a different thing, you can actually make it worse. So there's not just a skill of seeing what is going wrong, but you've also got to know how to rectify that. And there's probably 5 things that go into any one shot, whether it be footwork, where you hit the ball, the racket angle, the wrist, the backswing. So I'm looking at a lot of different things and identifying one thing generally that is going wrong and that I can change very quickly and simply. And so that first session with a player, I've got to get their confidence. I've got to make sure that I get that guy on court, whether it be Nick Wall, wherever it is. And with Nick, it was very easy. Within an hour, he was hitting the ball harder, more accurately and better. Now, some people come along and you'll get super talented players. You get Peter Marshall's 2 hands. Now, if they can do something again and again, repeat it and hit a ball tight down a wall 10 times, glue it, and the swing doesn't look right to me, I wouldn't change that. And that's a mistake coaches also make. They sometimes change things for the sake of changing things because they think it might look better. If you can repeat something accurately again and again, I wouldn't then change that, So that's very, very important as well, gain that player's trust. The other thing I want to know is also how to get the best out of a player. What works with them? So I look at individuals. I'll have spoken to them on the phone a few times. So it might be some people need to video them. Some people, they need to feel it themselves. Some people I have to demonstrate. So again, I'm looking at that player as an individual. So every person who sees me is treated as an individual. Of course, there's those which we'll talk about later, those non-negotiables, as you call them, which I don't particularly like the word, but I know what you mean. But they're all treated as individuals. But within those individuals, there are parameters of how you should hit the ball. Now, obviously, there's lots of different ways to hit the ball, but one thing I can tell you is I coach 15 players, they all hit the ball well. Not one of them hits the ball badly. I coach 6 juniors, 4 in number 1. 1's number 2 in the country. I only coach 6. So something's going right there. They all hit the ball well. They can all play a triple boast. They can all play a boast. They can all hold the ball. They all use height. So those parameters, those basics are very, very important and fundamentals of how to coach someone when you first start. We can talk about what those fundamentals are maybe later in this conversation, but that, in a nutshell, I've talked a fair bit there. I wouldn't talk so much to the player, but that, in a nutshell, is what I would do. I'd see where they are now. I'd also have a discussion with the player. I'd discuss how they want to play the game, how I see them playing game, and we'd hopefully we'd agree on the best way for them to play. I'd work out where they are now, which is pretty obvious, and I'd work out where they want to be in a year or 6 months or 2 years, and I'd have a vision of how I see them playing the game. So someone like Jonah Bryant's a good example. First coached him at 12, came to me full-time at 16. There was issues with Jonah at 16, and he wasn't playing how I felt he should be playing. We changed things, made him enjoy it, and we had that vision. And where he is now is where I saw him. Joel making exactly the same when he came to 17, 18 years old. He was a terrible squash player at that point, and I had a vision. I could see how Joel would play. It was robotic, but I had a vision which no one else could see with Joel. Someone like Joel, I took him to see Jonah Brown. He said, "What are you doing?" He's not even a county player. But I always had a vision, and you have to have that vision, imagination of seeing in advance of what a player can be, and the sort of player he can be. And that doesn't matter what standard it is. It doesn't matter if they're a beginner, intermediate, advanced. You need a vision of what you're going to work on and how you can make them into a better person and the best they can possibly be. And that's what the skill of coaching is. It's getting the best out of someone. Just because you get to number 10 in the world doesn't mean you're the best version of yourself. It could be you got to number 3. You could have got to number 3 with some better coaching or some doing things differently. You might have got to number 20 and actually you've over-excelled. You've done better than someone and you'd think they would have got to 30. So a ranking doesn't always necessarily mean you're successful as a coach. I've had some people who definitely wouldn't have got to where they were, and some people who would have been very good, whatever. You know, so that's the skill as a coach, I think, Camps. So I've talked a fair bit there, but I'm also, by the way, not a believer in 1 step backwards, 2 steps backwards and then 1 forward. I mean, everyone says, well, 1 step back and 2 forward, this sort of thing. Well, there's some coaches out there, they go 3 steps backwards, 4 steps back, and they keep going bloody backwards, you know? We all know who we're talking about. There's a lot of people out there. So you should feel better. If something feels good and feels right, it should feel better straight away. It shouldn't feel awkward. It shouldn't feel uncomfortable. And when I get a person on court, the reason they buy into it, because as soon as I start hitting the ball with them, it feels better. I've yet in 15 years, if a player thinks, oh, I don't like that, it feels worse. And if it does feel worse, we'll have a chat about it. We might go back to what they're doing or just adjust it slightly. You know, I'm not going to start telling people. I ask very open-ended questions. And another thing quickly before I finish, as a coach, it's very important to ask questions and find out about the person, the player. So this is for all the coaches out there. A club coach, for example, a guy walks in for a lesson. What does he want? You know, you might know what you think he wants. He might say, I want to work my backhand. He actually doesn't. He might want to beat his mate in League 2. He might be coming here for some fun. He might be coming to get fitter. You know, and what people say they want is often what they want. So that's a skill as a person, as a coach, to find out what people actually want. You know, a lot of people don't do that. They do what they think they want and what they think they do, and then they think it's going great, and actually the person then doesn't turn up for the 3 lessons because they're bored, you know. Fundamentally, another thing, that they've got to enjoy playing. You know, we're all very privileged to be coaching squash and playing this sport because you've got to enjoy it. One thing my juniors, I get them to express themselves, imagination, flair, couldn't care less about making mistakes because they make mistakes at 11, they won't make those mistakes at 17, 18. But we've got a lot of kids in the UK especially, don't express themselves, all play the same way. You know, when you played Camps, when I played, we had imaginations, I wasn't coached. You had the privilege of having one of the great coaches, but a lot of us weren't coached, worked out ourselves. Sometimes kids these days have too much coaching, which is also a bad thing, so the flair's ironed out. You know, Egypt, you see all sorts of different styles. We talk about the Egyptian way, there is an Egyptian way. They all play differently. You know, there's some classic, what you'd say, English styles, there's Australian styles, there's shot players, there's defensive players, there's physical players, lots of different players. So, you know, you've got to let people express themselves and also always ask very open-ended questions. You know, I'm not telling my players, it's a discussion. And if I want them to ask a question, mate, a lot of people don't question people. You know, they should be questioning your coach. Ask them why. And if the coach can't explain why, I've had several coaches come down to Steve and I said, why are you doing that? They'll say something, I said, well, why is that then? And then they're stuck. They actually don't know themselves. You know, and that's also very important. So I welcome people to question me and I'll explain why we're doing something, why potential is better. I won't change something. I'll say, look, your forehand's no good, but this is how we can do it better. I won't just say, well, that's no good and they're not doing about it. There's no point doing that. It's always constructive, not destructive. As a coach, you need to remember that. There's always be a purpose. Every time you hit the ball, there's a purpose to that hitting. Yeah, does that answer your question? I mean, I've gone on a bit there, but I mean...
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of similarities about what, you know, when you talked about player expressing themselves, being there, an individual. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there between what you're saying and what Malcolm Woolstrock, who coached me, said. You know, very much so. And everything about being...
Well, you were a unique individual, Campion.
Yeah, exactly.
You were a bit of a one-off as well. But he allowed you to express yourself as a young man.
Well, everybody is. But, you know, I think what you said there about being simplicity for me, it allows you to repeat things. If it's simple, you can repeat it. Yeah. And the game's quite a simple game, isn't it? You play squash in the box. It's about making the court long, making your opponent move to the extremities. And I think that's something I picked up on. I've learned a lot from you as well as a coach, is how you make everything sound very, very simple. And I think that's what players like. You know, they are quite simple people, really. They just want to, you know, be good at something, enjoy playing the game. It is quite simple. But just talk to me a little bit about, you touched on it with the fundamentals and, you know, well, non-negotiables. But I think you do have non-negotiables, Rob. I think you do have certain things.
Like it's interesting on non-negotiables. I mean, we all have principles of hitting the ball, but within those parameters, there's going to be variations. There's going to be improvisations. I mean, don't forget, squash is a game of improvisation. What I would say to people, however, the less you improvise, the better you're going to be. So, you know, when someone like Sarah Jane Perry came, for example, she was improvising probably almost 40-50% of the time, as you know. So she was just trying to do too much. She was using her wrist everywhere. Now she was probably one of the most talented players I've ever coached. Best ball striker in the world. She clearly was, because she couldn't move, and yet she beat Shabini 3 times in a row, got to number 4 or 5 in the world, and she literally couldn't move. So what a wonderful ball striker. But my mission was like yesterday was to actually give some structure. Okay, but with all my players, they first come. There are some what I would call non-negotiables, and I'll just list a few of them, I suppose. I mean, we'll start with the racket and the swing. So racket preparation to me is a non-negotiable to a certain extent. Now you'll see your Mazen Hashams. Now is he better because he does that? No, you know, and where he breaks down is because of his technique. Now obviously when you've got fresh air around the ball, there's no one better. You don't know where the ball's going, but that's no good if you're playing Paul Coll or whatever it is, who basically beats me every time, or an Ali Farag who's gluing the ball down the wall. That's when the technique comes down. So I've brought a racket with me. So your first thing is racket preparation. Very simply, this is the fundamental. It wants to be pointing pretty much to the roof. Okay? I hope everyone can see that. You can see that okay, Camps, can you? So that's where your racket want to be, with the wrist up there. So I can show that probably a little bit better there. If I do that, that's probably a bit better. So that is my grip with there. We'll talk about the grip very quickly. So the racket preparation is there, okay? So that's the fundamental for me. And it's got to be an early preparation. That's a given. You'll see people do that. You'll see people do that. There's various reasons that's going to work. If you do that, you're going to come around the ball too much. If you do that, there's a lot going on. How are you going to play a drop shot from there? And that's a bit of a mesem type thing. You're going to come around there. There's too much going on. There's too much to go wrong. So that becomes very, very simple. The wrist position will also be cocked but relaxed. You'll notice the grip is a nice and balanced grip. I still see even top pros holding the racket like that. Little thing, Paul Coll, before he won the British Open for the first time, he was very tense here. I'd been coaching for a little period. He was getting to sort of, challenging Ali. But I still felt he was too tense his swing. And obviously when you're changing things with people, that happens a little bit. So I actually moved his thumb up the racket. I've just done it with Jonah Bryant as well. And what that has done is just released it a little bit. So it's just released the tension there. It's given a broader thing. And also on the backhand, it helps you sort of with that racket control. So that to me is something I will do with my players. I'll look at the grip. Someone like Josh Masters, who came to me from Bristol, he held the racket right at the bottom. He had massive levers. So to me, the grip was too long and it was too extended. So
Rob, let me just stop you there. So looking at your grip, if you look at the butt of your racket, just lift it up. That's it. So we can see that on the camera now. If you look at Rob, the butt of the racket, it's not actually in the palm of the hand there. It's actually more in the fingers, and it's coming out to the side. Can everyone see that? I mean, that's crucial. If you go back to how he was holding it like a frying pan before.
Yeah, if you're holding like that, you'll go down there. And the problem with that is you get too much wrist. There's no real control. There's no balance there. You want that to be relaxed. You also want to, I'm not going to get too complicated with that, but you want a slightly open face, which will help with the open face. And another thing that people don't realize, the grip will always change the backhand to forehand. There's always a slight movement. All players just turn it very slightly. It has to be. There has to be that slight movement as well. So don't think the grip is just one grip. So that's the fundamental. So you've got the racket position there, you've got that there. So that's the basis of any sort of good swing. You watch the top players in the world, it doesn't matter if the last year or 6 years ago, the racket for the top players was basically starting there. A really nice control position, very, very simple. The next thing we need to know is where we're going to hit the ball. And fundamentally, on the forehand, you want to hit the ball level with the tummy button. So that is a given. Now, that is something in the UK, especially, and other places, there's far too many people hitting the ball in front of that position, and therefore, the forearm will rotate, and we hit the ball very flat. It also becomes very predictable, and if you play a drop shot, it becomes very pushy. Okay, so I will be hitting the ball, literally, on my forehand, for example, there. So it doesn't have to be exactly there. It could be there. It could be there. A bit like when I say get the racket there, it doesn't have to be slightly there or slightly there. So I'm not being too particular. A few centimetres, that's fine. Same with this. That is roughly the position I'm going to hit the ball. It's going to be around about there. The racket face will be open, but I can easily adjust that. If I want to take pace with the ball, I will sometimes. So my really good players who've got good at these fundamentals, they can hit the ball anywhere from there to there. So they can go there, 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 there. Same racket speed. That would take some pace off the ball. That's a subtlety what I'm talking about here for advanced players, elite players. For some of the guys out there, you're teaching basics, so that will be where you hit the ball. Forehand swing, okay? The follow-through will always come straight. So my follow-through, I'm hitting through here, I'm going to hit my bloody everything here, I'm coming through there, and I'm going to finish there. Now, that is also a given. Because if I finish there, I'll finish around there. Why am I finishing there? It's probably because I've started there. So you need to recognise that as a coach. The reason someone's finished there is because they're coming around. Therefore, it's this sort of flipper motion, and they're coming around like that. If I'm finishing over there, that's also a problem. If the racket face is coming like that, I'm probably too close and I hit the ball. So these are all little signals that you can look for. Why is the shot going wrong? Well, if you start there and you finish there, trust me, it's going to go pretty much right in the middle. So that's a real basic for my players. I start there, I finish there, straight away that comes together. If I start there and finish there, something's gone wrong in the middle. So those are little sort of principles that I would say are givens. Footwork, Camps. Do you want to show some footwork?
Yeah, just before you do, one thing Rob talks a lot about, every time I go and see him, he talks about this. The footwork, don't think of movement as a separate thing. You don't work on your technique and then work on movement. It should be really done together, shouldn't it? Because the footwork is
Movement is technique. It's as simple as that. I mean, the swing and the movement work together. That's absolutely critical. It's all about balance. Balance in squash is critical. Someone like Paul, he was a pretty poor mover. I'm not going to mention individual I don't coach because there's some terrible moves out there who are top 10, who sort of sprint the tee, stop, then they move again. They get too close, they get too far away, they're too quick. It's got to be smooth and efficient. And the movement will work with the swing. It's important as coaches to realise that as you hit the ball, you are still. Top players look like they're moving, but they're not moving. They're actually still at the moment they hit the ball. They might have the leg will be down in position early. When you teach them things like hold, which I've never really seen anybody teach hold very often, but it really hold is just getting in the position early enough, and then the ball comes into the position you want to hit it. That is a very, very simple way to explain hold. I've heard all sorts of weird and wonderful ways and massive overcomplications about deception. Deception is being able to hit 4 corners or different shots with the same swing and the same footwork. So a lot of my players are deceptive, that means to be. Camps have seen me feed a ball, and my players don't read me very well because, and I'm not trying to send the wrong way, they just can't read it because I have the same swing for 3 shots. So I can hit a boast, and all that varies is the hitting point. So I'll hit the straight drive there, the cross-court slide in front of that position, and the boast will be slightly behind that position. So within that parameter, I'm hitting 3 different shots with exactly the same footwork and exactly the same swing. The racket face might adjust, but the player won't see that your body's in the way, and the racket face will be opening as you hit that ball. Now, this is obviously a little bit more sort of advanced, but these are basic principles, Camps, I think.
One thing, Rob, as well, what you talk about a lot, if you take it too early in front, that's a different thing. You're taking time away, but you're certainly not going to be able to have multiple options when you're that far in front. Is that what you're saying?
The only time I would take the ball in front of me, for example, there are times you step out in front of you and you play the ball early on a drop shot, and I'm left-handed, it's on my left leg, or if you're a right-handed player, you're taking your right leg there. If the guy's stuck in a corner, he's played a 3-ball boast and he's stuck right at the back, you want to get that ball as quick as you possibly can. Okay? There's a big space there, hit the space. Generally, though, if you're volleying the ball and coming across, and you're moving across that lateral position with the tee, and you play the ball in front of you, that will just be a push. Whereas if I play the ball from this position here, and I'm there, I can play a drive there, I can play a cross court there, I can open the wrist and play a bit behind, I can play a volley boast. If you know where the ball's going, that's a huge advantage in squash. It's got to be a very, very good shot if you play a drop shot and someone knows where it's going. I can play an average shot if they think the ball's going over there and the ball goes there. I can play a far worse shot and I can win the point. So it's very important to have a deception and also have the best technique. If you play the ball flat, it's not going to die in the same way if you play in front of you because you've got a closed face. Because as I said to you, this forearm will rotate. And there was a thing with a certain national coach before you Camps that was everyone was taking the ball in front of them with a big step. It was horrendous stuff. It was horrendous. It was horrific. It didn't work at all. It worked with a couple of players, and arguably they would have been better if they hadn't hit the ball like that, for sure. It's a shame I wasn't national coach at the time. There we go. We wouldn't be left the legs we have now. But that was a real problem. It was a real issue, you know. So play that ball there with an open racket face. Cut the ball, because the cut will make the ball die. It will get there quicker. A lot of people think they see a great drop shot. It goes there real slow. It gets in there and it dies the nick. Unless that's perfect, quick players, you know, the really quick players and the quick juniors are going to be onto that. They're going to whack it past you very quickly. So you've got to put that ball in quick with cut. The quicker it gets there, the quicker it dies. The slower it gets there, the longer it takes to die, which is very obvious when you think about it, but again, it's just very simple. So I have a lot of these sort of simple golden rules. So the footwork, it's very important. I'll show you that quickly, Campster. It's very important that the feet are straight here. So my feet, I'm not sure if you can actually see this. So my feet will be, you can't really see that, can you, Campster?
Put the camera down a bit more, Rob. A little bit further down. That's it.
Okay.
A bit more. Move.
So here, my feet are going to be, but for a forehand, they're going to be this sort of position there. If you had a squash court there, from the front foot to the back foot, there'd be 2 floorboards. So I don't want to be too straight, because if someone pushed me then, I wouldn't be balanced. So I want to have them nice and balanced there, and my feet are going to hit. I hit the ball there, and my feet are straight. So I can very easily hit cross court there, and I can straight there. I can also hit a boast there. Okay? What I don't want, which is what I'm sure some of you guys do this, you have this position here. Now that's fine in playing a straight drive. But for one thing, one of the problems is I start my swing there, and I start there, and I hit my leg. It's in the way. Now the other thing is I play cross court. Invariably, if I play the ball a fraction behind the foot there, I'm going to use that wrist and hook it round, and I'll play a very poor width. Okay, it won't go and hit the cross on the sidewall. And what I've had people coach come down, they said, "Oh, done that. Okay, that's great. Now hit a cross court," and they do this. They move their feet to the cross court. Now straight away, I know they're going cross court. So there's a differential between the straight drive and the cross court drive, which is a huge problem. If I go like this here, you know, you can't see the racket now, but if I go that sort of position there a little bit, my feet are like that, and I say, what shot I'm going to play? I can do anything, you know. that's a drive, that's cross court, that's a triple boast, and that's a boast. Those 4 swings were different shots. They all are very similar, so hopefully you can get that. Can you see that, Camps?
Yeah, no, good. Yeah, and I think that's what it is. You talk about the position allowing, like the swing, the footwork, the movement will allow multiple options. And it's not really deception, is it? Deception is trickery. This is not trickery. This is just part of your swing, right?
Yeah. One thing I'd say, a little example yesterday, actually, Sarah Jane Perry, a girl I'm sort of helping coach and mentoring a little bit at the moment, excellent ball striker. She's just started her coaching journey and she's going to be very, very good. She was coaching a young lady yesterday who's a professional, good player. She was practicing backhand drives. Looked great, absolutely fantastic. I watched her hit 20-30. Didn't say anything other than, a few obvious things, which is fine. And I went on and stopped her. I said, look, I hope you don't mind, to the lady in question, what do you think about hitting a cross court there? No, she wasn't. She said, no, I didn't even think about that. Well, and I could tell she wasn't. The reason I asked the question was because she was lined up to hit a straight drive. And I never hear coach say you think about hitting a cross court. So whenever you're doing straight drives to someone, suddenly say to someone, hit a cross court. Or are you thinking about hitting a cross court? And then once you do that, you'll be amazed at the change in their feet. Because all of a sudden they're thinking about playing the other shot as well. So whenever you're practicing something, whenever I go into play a drop shot, I'm thinking about a drive. Whenever I think about playing a drive, I'm thinking I'm in a position to hit a drop shot. And that's the fundamental principle of coaching and playing at a top level. Another reason why players very quickly, they become a bit more deceptive. Even people who aren't deceptive become a bit more deceptive to actually think about the other options. And if you think about hitting the ball in different corners and different shots, you'll suddenly start to actually adjust that, and that will show in your body language, in the racket, and in your footwork. So, I mean, and as soon as she did that, all of a sudden, she got better, because all of a sudden I could see she hit a cross court. Now, it's one more shot, but you're hitting opposite corners, and that's huge. If you're just hitting a backhand drive, someone's going to stand behind you, just volley it back past you. So that's a fundamental principle as well, Camps, I think, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know. It's just, as Rob's talking, just be thinking of any questions, or if you want to start putting some questions in the chat, and William will facilitate that. But I've got a question for you, Rob. Just on, you're known amongst the players for, like, you're very kind of precise with your game plans.
Yeah. Just one quickly, guys, before I forget. Talking about movement, guys, do not do that banana shape to the bloody ball. I see a lot of coaches still doing a banana shape to the ball and the upside on. Horrendous. Don't do that. Get the ball as quick as you can, straight line. You want to be side on the ball with a straight line. With those feet, as I said, I'm still seeing people and coaches and videos all the time, a banana shape. Horrific. Don't do it.
Yeah. Would you say, just on that, would you say when you're moving to the back corners, move directly to the ball, but to the side, directly to the side of the ball?
Yeah, directly to the side of the ball. I mean, look, again,
not with a curve. And
no curve at all. You should never have a curve. Why would you, look, if you're playing Jenga Khan, he's hitting a million miles an hour, you're not going to get the bloody ball if you do a curve. The ball's gone and bounced 3 times, he's serving. So don't take this sort of curve thing. Same with kids. I've pretty much golden rules. Back right, before the back wall, you should take the ball on the right leg. Okay, so, and that helps the movement coming out with a swing for you guys on your forehand, and you would take the ball on that basis. On the back leg, you take the ball level with the back right leg for a right-hander. On the forehand, for me, obviously, it's level. And the racket needs to be up before the ball comes down. So before that, you need to get the foot behind the ball, rack it up, and then you're playing that ball level with the back leg. You will then hit the ball and you'll come out smoothly. If you use the other leg, you're actually facing the back wall. That's also a disaster. You're hitting away from yourself and not even watching the front wall. I still see lots of juniors do that, and some good players do that. Okay? And obviously, you also rule out the cross court, because the ball ends up being behind you. You have to use the wrist to hook it round. And there's a lot of top players still doing that. Someone like Paul's a big difference, and Jonah, you'll see them lift out high cross court from that position, and they can turn defence to attack very easily and very comfortably, get back out, reset a rally, and even use that as an attack sometimes with someone pushing forward. Front right, front left, so front right for a right-hander. If you've got time, always go on the left leg, because you've got a lot more options there, you've got a lot more power. If you haven't got time, you would always go on the right leg. Sometimes you'll play a counter. If you get really good, there's a little drop shot thing you can do, which is quite tough technique to do, but otherwise, generally, I'd lift it on that leg. Because you're defending, you're resetting, you can turn defence to attack very comfortably. But if you have time, Paul Cole, again, took everything on his right leg. I had a girl in recently, I watched her, she'd been with another coach. She did 14 in a row on her right leg, driving the ball and playing a drop shot. The drop shot becomes very predictable off that right leg, Camps, as you know, and you also lose any power. It's also very difficult to hit straight off the right leg from that side. So left leg, given time, right leg under pressure. Backhand side, the same thing.
Yeah, you lose your options, don't you? If
you have no options, And
it's really important, isn't it, to practice a correct foot if you can, as best you can. But to be honest, the right leg is an improvisation, isn't it? And you use your right leg a lot in the match. You get that. You have to.
Yeah, you have to.
Being a right-handed player, given the
But again, you'll be surprised how often you get on that left leg if you practice it. You know, so Paul Cole, if you watch him play now, nearly always ends up on that left leg because there's obviously a bit of speed, he's balanced and he has functional balance. The only time he ends on the right leg is he's doing a big lunge or stretch. And the less he lunges, the less tired he gets. There's a lot of players, you get very heavy if you're doing a lot of lunge on that right leg. It's a tough movement in and out on that right leg all the time. You don't want to be doing it if you can possibly help it, Camps, as you know.
Yeah. Okay,
what was the question you're going to ask me? So sorry about that.
Yeah, just on your game plans. But I mean, look, you have got a really good squashed mind, and you seem to see things. So I just want to talk to me about kind of game plans. If a player's got, like Jonah Bryant today, or Sam.
Well, Jonah's an interesting one because he's got no brain.
Sam Osborne-Wild's playing Greg Marsh today, right? So yeah. Let's talk about that.
Well, he's going to be on there in about 5 minutes. I'll be watching him. Don't worry about that. And I can multitask and talk to you guys at the same time. But, I mean, game plan's an interesting one because I think game plans is something people get pretty wrong, really. I mean, the first thing I'd say about game plans, they've got to be simple. The game plan, the way I look at game plans, I'd always watch the opponent first. I'd watch the opponent lose, see what he's like under pressure. And when he's losing, I'd watch the opponent win. So I see what he's actually doing when he's winning. Because they're two very different things. Because people look $1 million. I mean, you looked $1 million when you're winning Camps. You look like a bit of shit when you're losing. You're terrible, didn't you? You know? So everyone, I was the same as you, don't worry. You know? So we all look different winning and losing. And you see people under pressure, how they react physically, this sort of thing. So I'd watch those two matches. I would then have a look at them. I'd say, actually, is my player better than them? Or is he slightly worse than them? If he's better than them, I'll focus more on my player. I'll focus more. It's more about what he's doing. Of course, I'll still be a little bit aware of certain things, like he might have a great backhand drop, whatever, but I'll be focusing really on them playing their games. I know if my player plays well and he plays well, who's going to win the match? Well, my player's going to win the match. So it's about getting him to play as well as he possibly can. Now, if he's playing someone I think is slightly better than him, for example, Sam Osborne-Wild today, as you mentioned, is playing Gregory Marsh. Now, Sam should have a good game with him. But on paper, you'd have to, you know, if I was betting on it, I'd have Marsh a slight favourite. Of course I would. Now, Marsh now Sam's backhand is better than his forehand. But Marsh's backhand is a lot better than his forehand. Now, Marsh's backhand is possibly better than Sam's backhand, in my opinion. Technically, he's very sound. His forehand is poor, Marsh. So, therefore, Sam today will trying to play a lot down his forehand. He'll be also using a bit of height against Marsh because he's only about 4 foot tall. So, height's always a good weapon against him. And he does tend to go high cross-court. He goes for a cross-court volley nick. So, there's a chance to attack him off that. He often goes short. You can put a quick straight drop in. It's on a glass court. So, he's going to try and pin Marsh on that forehand side. Marsh uses his wrist a lot. And he sort of hooks it from behind him. And then again, that's something that I see, something I don't see. For example, I had an ex-World One talking to me about Baptiste, and his backhand was stronger, worse than his forehand. Now, that's clearly wrong. His forehand's a lot worse, so you've got to make sure you're getting it right. And with game plans as well, I've heard a lot of coaches give game plans to players. I thought, well, that's pointless, because the player's actually not good enough to execute the game plan. There's no point me telling Sam to hold everything. He can't hold a ball or use drops all the time. His drop's no good. So you've got to give your player a game plan, especially at junior level. Give them a game plan they can actually execute. And the other thing, when I've been talking to people, I'll give you a good example of a game plan. So like SJ was playing Shabini once, and I was actually there. I don't often go. I was there live. She lost the first game. She played very well. We had a very clear game plan. Now, SJ isn't going to beat her way out rallying and this sort of thing. She had to attack the ball, put a lot of drops in, get Shabini behind. But believe it or not, you have to find a weakness to everyone. And Shabini has got weaknesses, and they're just not many. But she's not the quickest to front sometimes. So SJ had to attack the front. Now, she lost the first game 11-9. She said, well, what do I need to change? What do I change? I said, well, nothing. You've got to keep doing what you're doing, but do it better. 10% better and you'll win. She ended up winning the match because she just did the same thing, but slightly better. And it gave her confidence. And I think a lot of coaches, they change things because the player's losing. And that's not always the case. Now, sometimes it can also work the other way where somebody is losing, you change something because your game plan isn't working. They're actually outplaying them doing that. And it might be the team position's too low, they need to volley more, push up, whatever it is. So game plans are critical. And I've had a lot of players, someone like Joel, for example, who's coming through, but a lot of players he wasn't as good at using a game plan. You know, I mean, I remember in Patrick Green was way better than him. And I got Joel to crunch everything hard and low cross-court to Pat's forehand. Pat wasn't the best turning, and he literally just smashed the shit out of it going forehand. And Pat broke down. Now, that was a game plan to beat a specific player. And he was clearly a better player, Pat, in every department, virtually. So you can have a game plan executed by someone not as good and win a match. And I think these days, I'm talking to coaches, not enough people have a game plan. You know, they go on and I watched a lot of players. I mean, I'll give you an example of policeman talk about him, but Yao, for example, lovely bloke, good player. He plays Paul Cole, he gets battered every single time. He hasn't yet changed his game plan once. I couldn't believe it. He played Paul last week. He's lost in 30 minutes again. First game's the same. Second game's the game. Third game. Now, he needs to be thinking about, I've got a whole load of things I'll tell you how to do against Paul. or against someone, you know, and you need to change. You keep losing. If you don't change things, the same result's going to keep happening. You know, unless you fundamentally massively improve suddenly. But so you've got to change things, be prepared to change things as different players. And sometimes you might be as comfortable playing that way, but there's no point giving me a game plan to one of the players that he's going on court for 45 minutes or an hour. It's a slow death. I'll leave a game plan. You might lose 3-0, but you've got a chance of winning. Because that's what it's about at the end of the day. With a one-off match, it's about result. It's not about necessarily playing well. It's about winning that match, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I remember James was... They beat Mohamed El Shabaghi in the World Champs when Mohamed was world number 1, and I think it was quarter final, knocked him out. James was 2-love and 10-7 up match point, and he lost that game. And I remember him coming off, and it was almost like dejected, as if what do I do now? Like,
yeah,
you know, from this winning position, how you know? And I said, look, are you exhausted? He went, no. So right, well, you can last another 15 minutes. You just do 15 minutes of the same stuff you've just been doing.
Yeah,
that same stuff got you to 2-love and 10-7. That was good enough to win the match.
Yeah,
so you don't change it. You know, you don't change it. It's done really well to pull you back, and that's why he's world number 1. But you've got to do more of the same, which was, you know, James was trying to do what he needed to do and bypass that forehand volley. And because at that time, Mohamed was playing at a lot faster pace than he does now, clearly.
Yeah.
And he had to bypass that forehand, and James's backhand was his strongest side. So keep it tight on the side wall, take the pace off, use a bit of height, just, you know, make him play it off the side wall, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
And then when you're in front, be clinical to the front. Don't open the court up and allow him to pounce on that forehand. And he starved him of that forehand side. And just do it again. You just got to do that for the 15, 20 minutes. That's all you've got to do it for. You're not exhausted. You can do more of this.
Yeah.
And I think one question. We have one question. The first one from the chat. Sorry to bother you. From Garrett about the touch on the off-court ways to affect change quickly. Maybe motivation, prep, mental side of the game.
Sorry, what's the question?
What about from Garrett? Can you also touch on the off-court ways to affect change quickly or quicker? Maybe through motivation, prep, mental side of the game.
Well, look, I mean, well, obviously, if a player hasn't got pride or motivation, there's no point in playing the game. Simple as that. So, I mean, it's not a great question, really. But, I mean, look, when someone approaches me, obviously, I get to know them as an individual. And it's very important to say we're going back to motivation will come from enjoying it. You know, when people are losing all the time, they don't tend to enjoy it as much, do they? So I think the motivation side of things comes from obviously wanting to be better, wanting to improve. You need a growth mindset. But as a coach, I spend a lot of time talking to my players, all sorts of individuals. You know, so I speak to every player I coach every day. He's getting to know them, he's talking to them. And some people, it's interesting because obviously when it comes to motivation, some people need a kick in the bollocks, like George Parker, for example. But also, although he's a strong character, he also needs an arm around him sometime. So there's some people who really need an arm around them. Some people need sort of pushing and motivating. And some people can do that themselves. Joel Makin, for example, was incredibly motivated. You know, I never once, and, you know, we had a great relationship and never once probably had to tell Joel to train harder. If anything, it was trying to get him to do less. So everyone's different in that way. But I think the fundamental thing is you've got to find out what's best for that person, what's worked for them. And again, it's treat them as individuals. Pride always comes in, but we've always got pride. Me personally, I don't know how Camp's felt. To me, it was always about I wanted to improve because I hated losing more than I enjoyed winning. And I found that with a lot of top players, it's actually that sort of, it's that they hate losing rather than the actual enjoyment of winning. And sometimes I think, as players, and I say this to my players, you do need to enjoy the moments when you win a bit more. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Camps.
No, but I mean, I've heard a lot of top players over my time say that exactly that same thing. They actually hate losing. That's what drives them. They hate losing. In fact, I heard Gohar say that quite recently. We were doing a call in somewhere, and she said that. You know, she did say actually a lot of the greats. The reason why they're great is because they absolutely hate losing.
There's a stubbornness about it, you know, and sometimes as a coach, stubbornness is a weakness in my opinion. Because, I mean, I'm always adapting, I'm always looking at changing things, I'm always looking at improving. I mean, you guys are here because you want to improve. Whether you learn how this is irrelevant. If you might not agree, and that's fine, but you're listening and you're taking on board and you can take out what you want of it. I'm constantly looking at videos, constantly looking at what's out there. I've got a lot of respect for everybody. Everyone's trying their best, by the way, coaching. You know, no one's trying to do a bad job. We're all trying to do our best. Some do it better than others, which is fine. But everyone's trying bloody hard, and we can always learn something. You can always improve a lot, you know?
Yeah, I've got a question coming from Jenny.
Yeah. Jenny who? Never heard of her.
Hi, Jenny.
Yeah. You want to speak up, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Rob. It's really engaging. I think it'd be really interesting for people just to hear about the wider leadership role and your view on that as a coach, and especially in relation to engaging sponsors in squash. Just talk a bit about what you do to bring sponsorship in, engage sponsors with players, include them in your environment. I think that'd be good for people to hear, because I think, there's not a lot in squash said about that, and I think it's something you do really well.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's obviously an important part. Obviously, I'm unfortunately sorry about this. I'm talking about a high end, because obviously players need sponsors. Because a lot of these guys need funding. And the irony is, obviously, the better you get when you get to Joan and Bryant, Joel Makin, Paul Cole, you don't really need that sort of funding the same way. It's when you first start. So it's very important to engage with people as players. I help my players a lot with that. I involve sponsors. I approach people. I make sure my players behave with respect. And their eloquence off court. They talk well to people and make sure they engage with people. I do the same myself. I always have done. Communication is a massive part of both coaching and life. And I think if you can get your players to communicate well, and that's another thing I always try and do, I get them to understand what I'm doing with them. And I think that's critical, because if they don't understand it themselves, what chances have they got of improving? So if they can understand this, I've several of my players, I've had coaching, so they've actually had to pass it on, actually makes them think about their own game more. But dealing with sort of people off the court, dealing with sponsors, dealing with people who are potential sponsors, or just talking to anybody, because everybody out there is a potential sponsor for these guys. I always, as you know, Jen, I never ever not reply to somebody. If somebody messages me, I talk to people. And I've met many, many interesting people through that. And some people end up saying, look, do you know what, I love what you do. I'd love to help. And I think we can all learn a bit from that. We're all busy, but you can always make time for that sort of things. And I think that's something in squash we don't do particularly well. I've probably been successful with that because I have engaged and I have reached out. Sometimes don't be afraid to ask either. People are sometimes embarrassed to actually ask for help. I've never been embarrassed to ask for help, because we all need help. And I've met people myself that helped me. On all sorts of things, yourself included, obviously done a fantastic job. We obviously speak a fair bit, and it's very important to connect with the right people. Connect with everybody, but with the right sort of people. And we haven't got enough of the right people involved in squash, in my opinion.
Rob, you just touched on that a little bit, actually, and I just want to ask you about that. You talked about you've got to make sure the player understands and values what you're trying to get them to do. So how do you tackle that? So you're not just telling them what to do. You get
never do that. I'll explain what to do, but I will also then say, right, repeat about what I've said. I do that a lot of times. I had a coach down last year, and he explained how to hit a forehand. I won't tell you who it was or what he said, because it was a bit. It was pretty outrageous. Well, it wasn't outrageous. It was he talked about something, and the players all nodded in agreement. And I said, guys, do you understand that? They all nodded their head and said, right. I said, right, now explain that. Not one of them could explain what he said, and the coach himself couldn't actually explain what he meant. So that's a good example of a player not really understanding. They nod their head and they say yes. So I think as coaches, it's very important when someone nods it and says, I will say, okay, you explain that back to me and tell what I mean, and then demonstrate it. So I will get my players to demonstrate exactly what I mean, and I might get them to get a kid on court and say, right, just go and show him what I've just told you. Explain it to him, and I'll listen to that, and they learn far more about themselves and how to hit balls. So that's really important. Open-ended questions all the time. There's too many coaches, and also there's a lot of coaches who talk too much. When I'm coaching, as you've seen camps, I'm hitting a ball a lot of the time as well. I'm talking while I'm hitting a ball. There's a well-known coach in Warwickshire. He has an hour session. He talks for 50 minutes. It's pointless. They hit 3 balls and he stops them. He talks about the wrist being 17 degrees instead of 15 degrees. It's just absolute bullshit. He's looking at the little details, minute little details, and kids end up getting worse. They get bored. You've got to engage them, and kids fundamentally love hitting a ball. Players love hitting a ball. So we can, of course, sometimes do a more technical session, as you do as well, Camps, but most of the time I'm on the hitting. They need to feel it themselves under pressure with a ball. And the better level, the more intensity there is, the more pressure.
And on that, so like individual coaching versus group lessons where there's more open skill based, or, is your individual coaching quite open as well, would you say? I
think individual coaching is critical, because obviously, that's the one time you get to coach that individual. And I've got 10 players, they are all individuals, probably 12 now. My kids are all, and I want them to express themselves. Your personality should be shown on a squash court. So please express yourselves. Don't put people in a box. There's too many people in various institutions that are put in boxes. You've got to break through that box and be your own individual. You need obviously some structure to what you do, but be an individual. So I think individuals are critical. I always think groups have also got a great room for it. I would not normally try and have more than 3 on a court. Now I understand some of you guys might have 4 or 5 in the court. You know, I had Sam Todd come down to the week, for example, and he's on in an arena where they have 4 or 5 in the court regularly at Pontefract. Now, the reason they have 4 or 5 in the court is not because they want 4 or 5, it's because there's just too many people. There might be 60 people and 10 courts, whatever. Now, Sam Todd can't hit a cross court very well. The reason for that is he never hits cross courts at Pontefract. They do straight line hitting all the time. And I've noticed that with a lot of their guys that they're actually very poor in cross courts because they're not practicing that often. Whereas I would have 2 people on court, and the cross court is just as important as a straight drive. Sometimes more, because you can work people on the cross court far more. You can really, a straight drive, you're running up and down a wall, it's a very simple movement. So it's just important to do as much on cross courts as on straight. So I would generally have 2 people on court. Of course, sometimes I'll take them all on court and talk to them as a group camps, and there's a value in that, of course, because you can get the message across in an hour to 10 players rather than 1. But I think that one-on-one time is absolutely critical. So Jonah, Joel, all these people, I've done hundreds of hours individually, talking to them, mentoring them, talking about the game and really work on what's good for them. And as we said in the start of the talk, how I see them playing the game and really emphasising that and, you know, making that even better.
Yeah, can you talk to one thing that I think people will be really interested to hear about is Jonah Bryant came to you as, you know, quite a young boy, and just talk to us a little bit about what did you do at the start? What have you done?
Jonah was very interesting. So I first saw Jonah at 12 years old. So there's a history for starters with his dad. I knew his dad, Ross. He'd been to Milford School. I was mentored by Jonah Barrington, as people may well know. Played Jonah for 3 years. I mean, Jonah wasn't really a coach as such, but I talked to a lot, like a lot of us did in our area. So I learned a lot off that guy. So straight away, there's a bit of history there. Ross sent Jonah to me at 12 years old. I actually remember changing his grip for the British Junior Open. So we always kept in contact. I'd been asked a few times to sort of do some stuff. I always felt a bit young. Anyway, 16 years old, and people wouldn't realise this because everyone thought, well, it's been a really great journey all the way through from 16 to where he is now. It's been an easy road. It hasn't. When I inherited Jonah, he'd virtually stopped playing. Barely played the game for 6 months. He wasn't enjoying playing squash. He'd gone from number 1, winning the British Open in the 13 to losing first round in the 17 British Open. First round he lost, and he hadn't played. The relationships with his father and squash and family were poor, very poor, disintegrated to the point where he wasn't enjoying it. So I had a long conversation with Dad. I had to exclude his father from the squash side of things a little bit. I'm sure Ross don't mind saying that because their relationship broken down. It was affecting all other relationships with the squash thing. So, and that worked very well. I wanted Ross to be a great dad, which he is, and I took over the squash. My first thing with Jonah Bryant at 16 years old was to start enjoying it because that was a guy who was virtually stopped playing. He didn't enjoy it at all. He was losing. He was gone down to 3, 4, 5 in the UK with 3 or 4 other people. Finn Whittingham, Hassan, who I coached, and somebody else was beating him. And he was gone to sort of 4. And I realised he had a lot of ability, but it was being wasted. He was starting to hit the ball very hard. He couldn't play a drop shot when he came to me. His swing was massive. He could absolutely crunch it. Hit a beautiful ball, but he just whacked everything. Ain't brainless. So I said, right, let's just start again a little bit. Let's just slow everything down. Let's get back to why you play the game. Let's start enjoying it first of all. I'm going to show you how to hit the ball. I'm going to show you how to play, how I want to play. This is my vision of you as a player, which he liked because he was a shot player. He was very different to Paul. And, I've never coached Joe like I coached Paul or Joel. Because I think he has different assets to his game. He's probably more of a shot player. He's going to move the ball around, different sort of strategies. He hasn't got their super physical strength, but he has areas where he's better than those guys, so he needs to be an individual. So I got him enjoying it. I then taught him how to change his swing, which we did. I got him playing some shots. He'd never played a boast in his life. Didn't know how to play a boast, so I got him boasting the ball. I got him holding the ball. I got him sending people the wrong way. I got him volleying the ball. His movements, he'd been told that he can only take 2 steps in the tee, which is an old traditional thing where 2 or 3 steps maximum, and he was doing a big lunge at the end. Very hard work, no deception. I got him balanced, and you yourself used to screech around. I could always hear Joan on court. She'd do his shoes screeching. Diving around, screeching, massive screech, his shoes are screeching as the floor. You'll never hear that with Jonah Bryant now. You'll never see Paul, well, at very occasion you'll see Paul Cole dive. When he came to me, he was called Superman because he spent more time in the air than on a squash court floor, And I said, you're a terrible mover, mate, which he didn't particularly like. Same with Jonah. He was very, very quick, Jonah, but he was just screeching around getting balls back. And I taught him to use his speed to get onto the ball, be more balanced. So, and then obviously what people see is where he is now, 11 in the world. They don't see all the work's gone into making that 11. And there's been thousands of hours with Jonah, talking to him most days, spending time on call with him, showing him exactly how it's done. Him copying a lot of how I hit a ball. And then obviously teaching all the strikes and varieties. Now at a stage where Only now we start adding in these varieties, a little cut across, a bit more hold. He's learned a little subtle drop shot, cross-court drop off a three-wall nick boast. We get underneath it, lifts the racket. All sorts of little subtleties are now being introduced. Now he's got the basics right. So he has a technique that will allow him to continue to improve, and a mentality as well of understanding the game. So he's been a very interesting journey. It's never quite the journey that people realise. I mean, Paul Cole was much easier. He was number 7 in the world when he came to me, but he'd plateaued at 7. But obviously with Paul, he basically came to me, and it was interesting because he was number 7 in the world and said, I don't really know how to play rock. He'd been coached with some quite high-profile people, but never really sort of had it communicated the way I could express it. And very quickly, I changed his movements, I changed the way he hit the ball and the way he thought about it. I got him losing a lot of lobs, a lot of height. I was probably the first person in camp, to use height against Ali Farag. A tall guy, traditionally people wouldn't get lob against a tall guy. I realised that Ali was weak back right on his forehand, technically. And then if you got him back right deep, he had to boast. Then Paul got on, his best shot was a backhand drop, which I introduced. And I realised that if Paul could get Ali doing those sort of movements, he's actually, the one advantage he did have was he's fundamentally fitter. But at the time when he was 7 in the world, he was doing 7% of work and I was doing 30. And I said to Paul, if we can get that to 50-50, or even, God forbid, Ali's doing 55% of work, we now have a chance to beat the guy. And then over a period of 6 months, that happened. To a point where I think it was 10-9 up. He had a 10-9 head-to-head with Ali over 19 matches, which was an extraordinary turnaround with some simple things. But again, there was a lot of work put in to get to that point.
Yeah. So a really good question, actually, coming from Jonah Atta, not Jonah Bryant.
He's going to say.
Yeah, how can you...
He's on call in 20 minutes. He's going to send me a question.
Has Sam started playing yet? Sam,
it hasn't
you
come
got it
up
on live
yet,
scores?
Yeah, it hasn't come up yet. No, I've got it on the screen, but no, I don't think he has. No, anyway.
Question here. How can you affect change in elite players whose muscle memory is already formed?
I've never had a problem. But it is an interesting question. I mean, yeah, that's a question I've never particularly thought about because it just happened. I say I've never had a problem. I've just stuck to my principles and fundamentals. So Paul, for example, was 28 years old. He'd played like that since he was a kid. And he changed in 3 months. Now, obviously, everybody has... Paul had a unique ability, which is an ability and talent to change quickly. If I said to Paul Cole, move your wrist from there to there, he could do it. If I said to John Maker, move your wrist from there to there, he'd go to there, or he'd go to there. So he had got that ability in the same way.
Yeah, you know what I think that is? I think that's the ability to trust the source of information.
No, I disagree with that because Joel Making trusted me completely. He did everything I told him to.
Oh, you mean, right, so Joel and Paul, you said slightly different there. One would change.
Completely different, because Joel would practice his drop shots for 5 hours and it would take a long time. It took a long time to get Joel to where he was, and because he hadn't got that natural ability to change. And he wanted to, and no one worked harder. Joel probably worked harder than Paul. It's fantastic to work with, amazing. But people having to take on information on board and adapt and change is a very interesting one. So Sam Osborne-Wild, he's a much slower learner than Jonah. Jonah again is another guy that I can tell him to do something within half an hour he can virtually do it. So he could change his swing if I wanted to do that or tops, but he could do it. Now I wouldn't do that, but I'm just an example, extreme example. If he wanted to do something different, he could. Some players don't do that, it takes time, but obviously there needs to be that belief, as you said. They've got to trust the source. But I've never had a problem changing something. I mean, SJ came to me a little bit later. I can't remember what she was now. She was 12 and world rever. So, but she had to change. She was a very complex character, and I had to explain everything to her, and then we had to discuss it at length, as you know. And she had to then trust you, and it took time with someone like SJ. But most people come to you, ultimately. I'm lucky that people come to me because they want to change. They come to me because they want to improve. So straight away they're buying it. Sam Todd, he comes down here because he wants to improve, he wants to learn. Nick Wall's come here, he's clearly improved straight away. As you said to me last week, Carl, he said, look, I've seen a big difference in just 6 sessions. The way he's playing, the way he's thinking about the game. But he's come to me ultimately because he knows it's not going well at the moment and he wants to improve. So I am fortunate, and then if I have young kids, they also, you have a little bit of a reputation, so they sort of, there is a buy-in which is helpful. But you earn that. I started with nothing, and I started with one player, Chris Ryder, and you sort of build that up over a period of time.
And then it's not a simple process, is it? It's like repetition, changing the neural pathways, lots of repetition, doing it the right way.
It is repetition, but I mean, generally when something feels better, it is an easier process. If it becomes awkward and sort of clunky, you won't expect change. So again, that's back to where you've got to feel they're hitting the ball better. So someone like Emily Howard, for example, who was a terrible ball striking form, could hardly hit the ball. She came along, and although she was only 18 years old or 17, she'd been playing since she was 9. So you could argue there's a lot of muscle memory there, 8-9 years. But she changed pretty quickly, really, and she wasn't a natural. But straight away it felt better. The footwork felt better, the racket work felt better, and most of all, she was hitting the ball better. And more accurately, the ball actually went where she wanted to, which is revolution for Emily. It's revolution that actually went down the wall instead of going down the middle. So that straight away created an immediate buy-in. But all you guys out here, and girls, ladies, you can all do what I've done. I started with nothing. You can all learn this, you can improve, watch a lot of people. When I started, I went round, camps, and I spent 6 weeks with Rodney Martin. I talked to yourself, Peter Marshall, even talked to Malcolm, all sorts of people. And I listened, I learned, I watched, and I tried to take the best out. I think I had a reasonable squash brain myself, played at a decent level, obviously, which is helpful. But you don't necessarily have to. Malcolm proved that you don't have to play squash at a great level to be a great coach. And he was a unique individual. So everyone here can be, the fact that you're actually on this shows the sort of growth mindset straight away. And this is exactly what we want. Have an open mind. And you can all be great coaches. There's no reason why anybody can't be a very good coach. Passion is what you need. Intensity a little bit.
And Theo Woodward, Theo's asking, what inspired you to get back to the game coaching? Because you had a period of time where you were a player.
I was lucky enough to sort of do okay financially in other areas, and I always followed the sport, always loved it, and very simply somebody asked me to help them, and I went on court and helped them, and I realised I had an ability to do this reasonably well, and I looked at what was out there, and I realised it was very poor. I looked at what was the other players, the other coach, and I thought, within 3 months, I thought, well, I'm basically way better than these guys. And that might sound a little arrogant, but I was. So I quickly, I thought, look, I should be doing this and trying to help people. And my only reason why I coach is to try and help people. And I love helping coaches, I love helping kids, I love doing the junior stuff, I love helping club members, anybody really. It's just nice, it's a nice feeling. So obviously, as you know, it puts me back into the sport. And I've had a fantastic time playing the sport and a lot out of squash, so it's just nice to have the opportunity to things like this to put a little bit back into sport.
Yeah, Rob, so a lot of people on this call will be dealing with or working with young kind of beginner groups or players that are not elite level. So let's say a young junior, very young. What would be your advice there for the coaches on the call in terms of what to do with them at such a young age when they're starting out?
Look, when you start out, and again, this is quite interesting because a lot of coaches say they say, "Oh, we don't really worry too much about technique now. We can do that later." Well, you should do it now because that's the most important time. Teach them to hold the racket right straight away. That's important. There's several coaches I see their kids and they're holding the racket like a tennis racket. And then, they'll be fine to start with. They'll hit the ball quite hard, they get the ball back over. As soon as they start getting better and playing better players, that'll become a limiting factor. So teach them to hold the racket right. Teach them to hit the ball correctly. Because, kids take on like sponges when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. It's the best time to learn. A lot of players, good players, start younger. So I would always encourage them. I think it's important not to get too technical. And it doesn't have to be too technical, but it can be very simple. Just get your racket up, get your feet in position, and move like that. But I play a lot of games, by the way. I think too many coaches do too many routines. I think there's far too many routines. I don't know too much about other countries, but in the UK, I've seen America as well. They don't play enough matches and games. And I said to you before, I think sometimes too much coaching is not a good thing. Maybe one lesson a week, fine. 1 every 2 weeks, I didn't have a coaching. But you've got to work out yourself as a kid. There's too many kids reliant on information and being told what to do and how to play. I watched my lad play twice a year. He was number 1 and 2 in the country. And, you say to one, you can't watch us, so you've got to work out yourself. The best way to work out yourself is losing. If you can't work it out and you're losing, well, you're never going to. You shouldn't have me telling you what to do. And it's the same with coaching. A lot of kids can work stuff out. Solo practice for kids. All my kids do solo practices. We haven't talked about solo practice, but even my players, Sam Todd came down a year ago, did 1 or 2 solo practices a week. He's now doing 5 or 6. He said to me, Rob, I think the ball's so much better. Something as simple as that. And he's doing solo practice with intensity, with a target, and he knows exactly where he's trying to hit the ball. He's got a purpose to how he's trying to do it. And that's important, Get kids having fun, enjoying it, but also playing in the right way, using flair, imagination. I can't emphasise enough how much important it is that you get kids to the door or beginners to the door, they've got to come back the second and the third time. So they've got to enjoy it. If they don't enjoy it, they won't come back. I heard a recent story of a coach doing a backhand for 6 months, with a 9, 10-year-old. Pointless. Absolutely pointless. Disaster. You imagine how bored that kid is. The bloke's talking for 45 minutes, an hour, and he's hitting backhands for 6 months. Kid doesn't even, he's fed up.
David, we got a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want to read some of them?
Yeah, just one here actually. So with your players, Rob, a lot of your players don't argue with the referee. They just get on with it. Paul, Jonah. SJ has a moment, or she did, but how do you get? what's your view on that with your players and the referees' decisions and not arguing and things like that and getting them to reset?
Well, my view on that is they're shit scared of me, and I think most coaches are too soft. You know, they're far too soft. They know they're getting a bollocking. They know they're getting in trouble if they get back. If I see him misbehaving, I banned a player, Simon Herbert, for a month in December. He was banned for a month. His behaviour is not acceptable, and if he continues, he'll be banned completely. I've never been scared to player camps. I've sacked several in my time. I won't name them. A couple of public bust-ups, but I mean, I'll give you one that's still with me, because he's still with me, so I can talk about it. Stamwells and Wild, he got the British Junior Open under 13. I sacked him. Okay, there was various things going on. It was mainly a parental thing. I said, no, I'm not coaching, that's it. If you think you can do better, that's fine, no problem. Every year after, till for 5 years, they rang me 3 times a week. He got worse and worse, by the way. He thought he'd be better elsewhere, grass is green, etc. Fine. Everyone couldn't believe it, because at the time he was a sort of shining light star. He's going to be brilliant. His dad said, well, he'll be world junior champion. So that's fine then. It doesn't bother me. Couldn't care less. I hope he is world junior champion though, but I'm coaching for nothing. I don't charge him. If you don't listen to me, go elsewhere. Went elsewhere. Every year it got worse and worse, ended up being basically pretty shit. Had him back at 17, 16, 17. Lovely lad. Everything's changed, fantastic attitude. But it sends a message to the players. You can't behave in a certain way. Parents can't behave in a certain way. And I'm very strict with that. Jonah Bryant's had his moments on and off the court. I deal with those privately. But they also know I'm pretty tough with that sort of stuff. I recently banned one of my top juniors for a week. Ali Khalil, I've just banned from national squads. He was doing court-through service against a girl and just being rude and disrespectful. Shouldn't be talking to people like that. He got to the British Open final last year. He's been banned. I've got him banned from national squads. It's not acceptable. Most coaches are too soft. They don't do that because they're scared. They want the players. If Paul Cole misbehaves, he'll be banned. If he keeps misbehaving, I'll get rid of him.
I got plenty of bans in my time with Malcolm.
Rightly so. I'd have got rid of you much quicker. Yeah, but you were driving down the M6 camps with a gun and a balaclava on, so it's a bit different, isn't it?
I got a month. I once got a month. Yeah, I won't tell you why. I won't tell you why. I won't go into that.
Anyway, David, we're getting to the end of this session, so if you have 1 or 2 more questions to ask to Rob.
I've got a question. I think everybody would be interested to hear. What are your thoughts on the current men's and women's game?
Just briefly. I'll talk the ladies first. The ladies' game is the best stand I've ever seen. It's amazing. I often enjoy it. I also when you talk about behaviour, I think the behaviour of the women is exceptional. Obviously getting it odd 1 or 2, which is always the case. They play the ball, they're fair. I think the stand's incredible. I mean, I've been lucky enough to, over 45 years, you see the best players for 45 years, and there's always been a period where you had Sue Devoy, you had Sarah Fitzgerald, you had Michelle Martin, amazing players. Then you had Nicole David. None of them as good as the top 3 now, in my opinion. Shabina's the best player I've seen.
I agree. Yeah.
Best I've ever seen, the complete player. She's not as good now as she was, by the way, but I mean, she's slowed off slightly, but I mean, of course, she's motivated, etc. There's probably various reasons for that. A couple of injuries, niggles. Still an amazing player, and she's still winning, even though she's probably 5-10% off what she was. You've got some exceptional players from like Weaver, for example, who probably would have been number 1 in another era. I'm not going to start talking about other eras and what they did or didn't do. You can only play the era you did do. We were lucky playing Jang and Jan's era, which again was one of the great eras. But the women's era is things amazing. Exceptional standard. Right, the top 20, I can watch them all day long. I thoroughly enjoy it. It's been the save the men's tour at times, so amalgamating the tours together was brilliant for women's squash. I think they should get more recognition. I don't think they get enough recognition. I think there's still too much recognition of the men's tour. I think the men's tour is probably one of the worst eras I've ever seen right now. Of course, I shouldn't say that because I coached the world in 2. One of the reasons that Joan and Zachariah come through so quickly is because they're very good. Zachariah is exceptional at 18, one of the best young players I've ever seen. Jonah's very good. He's not exceptional, but he's very, very good. They've come through like a knife through butter because the standard's very poor. I look at some of the top 20 players, they would have been top 4 in another era. The era 5-6 years ago, when you had the Nick Matthews, the Goldchase, the Shabagis at the best, I mean, they're miles off the best and they're still top 10, which is extraordinary. Testament to them, but they are way off where they used to be. You had Goldshay, you had Wilstrop, you had Rami, you had Shabana, you had it's just endless, the list of players. You had great players like Cameron Billy at 20 in the world, Suraf, people like that. So that was a wonderful era, and it's amazing it's going to be cyclical. We will have another era like that. But at the moment, there's been a big drop-off, and you only have to look at the average age of the players now. It's one of probably the oldest generations. Sadly, we haven't got the young men coming through the game. In the women's, we've got people like Anahat, and there's a lot of young Egyptian girls who are fantastic. So it's just a continuous conveyor belt of women's squash players coming through at the moment. And that's one thing I can't really understand why there aren't the sort of male players coming through at the moment.
It's been really great having you on and listening to everything. It's absolutely flown by. And I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy listening back to this as well.
Just quickly, Samuels and Wise 11-6 up, so that game plan, guys, is working a treat. That old French boy's getting his ass kicked.
That's good opening game for him, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, 11-6. He must have a bloody good coach, this kid. He's looking brilliant. Lovely swing.
William, anything final from yourself, or?
No, I'd just like to thank Rob. I think it was an amazing session. Just a quick question about, because now you are leading the high performance for Indian squash, so that means also you are kind of potentially meeting with other coaches from other sports. Is this something important for you to open eyes to other sports and to bring that to squash?
Look, I've been very lucky. I've been involved. My professional job is involved in other sports. Okay, it's horse racing, so I meet a lot of horse trainers, and there's the similarities in all sports. I'm always keen. I know quite a few sportsmen from the sports who what I've done, and you can learn a lot from other sports. There's a lot of crossovers. I mean, maybe the mentality in most sports is similar, but you can always learn things off elite sportsmen in any sort of sports. My S&C coach, for example, is the coach of Adam Peaty. So I've talked to him a lot about Adam and things, and so he was head of British Swimming. So you can learn a lot of other sports. There's no doubt about that. But just quickly, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for listening to me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. If anybody wants to sort of send me an email, I will try and answer some questions if I possibly could. So I'm always open to that. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you, Camps, as well. Thank you for asking some really good questions there. And thank you, everybody else. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you, William, as well.
Yeah, brilliant having you on, Rob. Honestly, really, really, really insightful. And I enjoy every time I talk squash to you. I enjoy it so much. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
cheers,
thank
guys.
you all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and stay tuned for the next World Squash session in May. Correct, David?
Yeah, May the 7th, I believe.
Yeah, and take care all of yourself and be safe. See you on court.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Good luck to everyone. Good luck.
Thanks.
Recording stopped.